dat to the Who Dat Nation. Welcome to the Dome Patrol podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. I am your host, Kevin Reed, and can somebody, anybody in the Who Dat Nation tell me what is going on? What is happening over there in Saints, the Saints facility on Airline? It is pure chaos, man. This has been the most frustrating, disappointing, just embarrassing offseason thus far for the New Orleans Saints, and we haven't even reached the Super Bowl yet. We haven't even crowned a champion for this season yet, and the Saints are already looking like a disgrace. Now, granted, the Saints looked bad throughout the season. We all remember the infamous 7-game-in-a-row losing streak and all this here, but it seems like it was turned up to 11 as soon as the regular season ended. The Saints, who fired their head coach very early on in the season, I think they were the second team to fire their head coach, and had a jump start on getting a coach before anybody else in the league. We still don't have a coach. Every other team has hired a coach, hired a coaching staff. Saints are still walking around like, which way did he go? Which way did he go? That still doesn't have a coach. All for a number of reasons, whether it be not giving a coach enough say-so in the personnel department, coaches not liking the quarterback room, coaches that utterly refuse to interview. They rather take a year off than come to the New Orleans Saints and coach this team. You have coaches who were a part of this organization and just said, nah, I'm good. You know, I'll stay right where I'm at as a lowly old offensive coordinator before I get my dream job of being a head coach in the NFL. Nah, I'm good. That says a lot about this organization. And then a bombshell. Then, after I think about 4 or 5 years of where this scandal took place involving the Catholic Church and sexual abuse charges that were linked to the New Orleans Saints, have reared their ugly head yet again due to a discovery of emails, and it shows that the New Orleans Saints were more involved than initially believed. So this is where we at. All of this in the week of the Super Bowl, right before the Super Bowl kicks off in New Orleans, nonetheless. And we got all of this chaos happening around the New Orleans Saints. I'm going to say, I wasn't going to do a show until the Saints hired a head coach, because I figured it was nothing to talk about. There was nothing to talk about in regards to the New Orleans Saints until we get a coach. Even with all the foolishness going on, when we were going through coaching candidates like toilet paper, I was like, man, this is getting ridiculous. Are there going to be any coaches left? There's literally only one coach left, and he's not 100% on board with it. He is really, at this point, they got to throw a bank at Kellen Moore, because he's the only one left. And if he says no, that's it. Even your backup to the backup plan is gone. Darren Rizzi, you could have fell back on that. Well, he went to the Denver Broncos to be their special teams coach under, you guessed it, Sean Payton. So that's gone. Clint Kubiak's gone, which a lot of people, me included, aren't shedding any tears about that, but he's gone. You know, there's no backup plans. There's nothing left. But we're going to talk for a little while. I'm not going to spend too much time on it because, you know, I want to keep I just went to the doctor the other day and my numbers were good. My numbers were great even. And I know if I continue to talk about these Saints for too long, my my medication will have to be increased. So I'm not going to talk about them too long. Um but I just want to get caught up on everything that has happened since the season came to an end a few weeks, about a month ago. And so let's run down what has happened so far involving the Saints in their search for a head coach. And we're going to dive into this new report of the Saints involved in this archdiocese sexual abuse scandal that took place, the child abuse scandal that took place. And I wanted, before we jump into that, and that's going to be towards the end, but before we jump into that, I just want to start off by saying we're going to discuss it, but I'm not going to pass judgment or nothing like that, because this is a serious thing. We can joke and play and kid about this coaching search, which I plan to, but it's only a joke. It's not really joking. There's real frustration there. But when it comes to that particular issue, that's a serious issue. And so we're going to keep it serious, and I'm just going to go over what took place, and we're going to move on and give my thoughts on how the Saints as an organization will move forward. And so we'll get to that in a few minutes, but let's dive in to this coaching search and why the Saints, as of February, the first week of February, don't have a coach. Let's not forget that the Saints interviewed quite a number of candidates. I'll give them this. They interviewed any and everybody for this job. Why none of them took the job, or why none of them were raring to take this job, that part I'm not 100% understanding. We got some clarification on a couple of them, but the majority of these candidates, it seemed like they were just interviewed for interview's sake. They were just doing their quote unquote due diligence and interviewing everybody that was available. But the most notable one and the hottest name, or I would say the second hottest name in the coaching candidate search throughout the NFL, was Aaron Glenn. Aaron Glenn, the defensive coordinator of the Detroit Lions and a former New Orleans Saints player as well as coach. He was interviewed and highly touted by the New Orleans Saints. I wasn't 100% on board with the New Orleans Saints hiring Aaron Glenn, and it's no slight against Aaron Glenn. I like Aaron Glenn. I just think at this time, the Saints need to bring in a offensive-minded coach. Aaron Glenn is a defensive-minded coach. And now, if the Saints would have hired Aaron Glenn, I would have been happy. Don't get me wrong. I would have been happy. But I think the Saints needed to go in a different direction. But with Aaron Glenn, I think Aaron Glenn would have brought a sense of discipline here, a sense of accountability here. And from what all accounts showed, he was willing to come here. He wanted to come here. His stipulation was he wanted to bring in somebody to help him with the personnel. We know that Mickey Loomis is pretty much the end all be all when it comes to the personnel decisions for the New Orleans Saints. In that regard, he was unwilling to give up any ounce of power. Now, Aaron Glenn was not asking for Mickey Loomis to step down from his position. He still would have been a general manager. He just wanted somebody in place to help him on his side of the things with the personnel. Saints declined. The next day, Aaron Glenn took a trip to New York, and he became the new head coach of the New York Jets. That was embarrassing to me. Number one, this is a man who was a part of your organization in two facets. He was a player and he was a coach. And the other thing is Mickey Loomis always harps on this culture that was built, you know, between Sean Payton and himself apparently, but this culture that this team has, Aaron Glenn was a part of that culture. He was a part of that regime. And so you kind of look hypocritical when you don't allow a coach to come in with some sense of say so. Every coach, I don't care who it is going to want an ounce of power. He's going to want the player. He knows who he wants to coach. You know what I'm saying? He does not want to be pigeonholed and then held accountable for players he didn't want on the team in the first place. And so you have that issue. And I guess he said, forget it. I'll just go somewhere else where I can have that power. Now, the Jets, he played for the Jets as well. If I'm not mistaken, I think the Jets were the one who drafted him as a player. So I get it. You know, good on him. I'm happy he has that job. Another candidate was Ben Johnson. Ben Johnson didn't even interview for the New Orleans Saints, the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. He went to Chicago. Interesting enough, he hired a new defensive coordinator who is the former head coach of the New Orleans Saints, Dennis Allen. And good on him as well. They're going to have a real good defense next season. I will never take that away from Dennis Allen. Dennis Allen is an absolute beast of a defensive coordinator. Yeah, he's going to have that defense hopping in Chicago. He's just not a head coach. And so you have that. The Saints also interviewed Anthony Reaver, the defensive coordinator of the Miami Dolphins. Once again, nothing against Anthony Reaver. Saints need an offensive-minded coach. They need a coach that's going to come in, understand an offense, and understand that our quarterback situation needs help. Understand that the quarterback who we currently have is not up to par, because that's the problem. These guys, Dennis Allen, even Darren Rizzi to a degree, didn't understand that this guy, Derek Carr, is not it. And hopefully, whoever comes in here will understand. We'll have a bird's eye view. But we'll get to that in a couple of seconds. I always felt my number one pick for the Saints head coach going into this offseason was Mike McCarthy. As soon as he didn't re-sign with the Dallas Cowboys, immediately he was on my hit list. This is who I wanted as the Saints head coach. Number one, he has cachet. He's won a Super Bowl. He's had multiple winning seasons, and we're talking double-digit win seasons, even with the Cowboys, because I'm including them all, you know, with the Green Bay and the Cowboys. But we'll just stick in Dallas. In Dallas, he only had one losing season, or maybe two. I think the first year and the last year. But every other year in between, he had a winning season, went to the playoffs every year. You know, couldn't get any further, but a lot of that is because of his quarterback. But in spite of that, he did what he did. He had to deal with the meddling of the owner. He had to deal with 2 or 3 different offensive coordinators, one being Kellen Moore, if I'm not mistaken. And he had so many obstacles against him in Dallas. Yet and still, they had a winning team. Didn't win anything in the postseason, but in the regular season, they looked phenomenal until last season. And so, I felt that he was an experienced coach, a coach that can come in. You know, you would have to give somebody like that some power. Mike McCarthy wasn't going to come in here and just coach. Mike McCarthy was going to come in here and have say-so over personnel decisions. And so that probably would have been a problem, which probably led to the fact that he withdrew from the race to be the Saints head coach. There was reports he was supposed to come in to interview I think the week of the snow, and they pushed it back to the following week. And there was reports before that day, before the scheduled day of the interview, that him and the Saints weren't seeing eye to eye. Very next day, we get reports he's withdrew from the race, and that was that. He's going to take a year off. A man rather take a year off than come here. Now, let's not forget, Mike McCarthy knows the Saints organization. Mike McCarthy was the offensive coordinator under Jim Haslett. Mike McCarthy had Aaron Brooks looking like a Pro Bowl. Well, he made the Pro Bowl with Aaron Brooks. Mike McCarthy was the offensive coordinator when the New Orleans Saints won their very first playoff game. And so Mike McCarthy knows this team. He knows this organization. So what happened? What happened? The man said, nah, I'm good. Nah, I'm good. But I think a lot of that is on the Saints because the Saints put all their chips into the Joe Brady basket. Joe Brady, the offensive coordinator of the Buffalo Bills, former assistant here in New Orleans under Sean Payton, also the offensive coordinator of the LSU Tigers that year they went and won the national championship with Joe Brady and that all-star team, Joe Brady with with Joe Joe Burrow and that all-star team. Yeah, he has a little say so. So I don't know what happened there. They scheduled an interview. Next day, Joe Brady said, I'm staying in Buffalo. I'm not taking that job. An organization he was a part of, an organization he got his start at. I'm good. I'm good. And so after that, the Saints went dormant for like a week. There were no interviews. There was nothing. And you're like, what's going on? Then the last chip fell, and there were no more coaching jobs. This was the only coaching job, and there were no more coaches. Now, the Saints interviewed Mike Kifka, the offensive coordinator for the Giants, interviewed him twice. I'm like, no. No, indeed, no. Have you seen the Giants offense? No, indeed, no. But what other options you have? You put all your chips in one basket, and it fell over. And next thing you know, Cliff Kingsbury name started coming around. Cliff Kingsbury came out and said, I'm staying in Washington as the offensive coordinator. He didn't want to come here. And so it's like, what's left? Only thing left was Kellen Moore. Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles. Now, he's in the playoffs. Most of these teams or these coaches that the Saints wanted to interview, their teams were in the playoffs. So they couldn't really, couldn't really get a full interview. These guys are focusing on the task at hand. And so when Kellen Moore name didn't really come up until the NFC Championship game, I think like the week before. And, he didn't give it his full attention because he's focusing on the NFC Championship game. And so after they won that, then everybody went to harping on Kellen Moore. Well, the report came out. Kellen Moore is not really interested in the job because he's not a fan of the quarterback room. That says a lot. That says a lot. He's not willing to work with him. He's not willing to try to train. I can see if it was just Spencer Rattler and Jake Hader. I understand that. Young guys, you really don't want to, spend your time trying to develop these guys and all this here. I can see where that can be a task. But you have an 11 going into a 12th year veteran. It shouldn't be an issue here. The reality is Kellen Moore is probably looking at Derek Carr and saying he has gotten 3 coaches fired, countless other offensive coordinators fired. He then got 2 of them fired here in New Orleans. I don't see. I'm not gonna put my future in the hands of this buffoon. So I get it. I understand. Well, the Saints are desperate, and the only thing I can think of that happened, the Saints backed up the bricks truck to him. Just gave him a blank check and said, just write a number. I don't care. We need you. We need you. My issue with all that is, and I hope this thing works out. I hope we do get Kellen Moore if that's the case. I mean, it is what it is. At this point, I don't care. I really don't. It can be the Budweiser man. I don't care. But the issue is, no matter who it is, at this point, whoever they hire, they know in the back, front, and middle of their mind, they were not the first choice. They were not the one that this team really wanted. They really didn't want them. They settled for you. We're basically settling for Kellen Moore. Now, it could turn out to be something amazing. Let's not forget, it's not like when the Saints hired Sean Payton back in the day that everybody knew that this guy was going to come and change this franchise and make it what it was, win our first Super Bowl, make us relevant, have us in the playoffs the majority of the years he was here and all this. Nobody knew that, because I sure didn't. I didn't know who Sean Payton was. I knew he was the offensive coordinator of the Dallas Cowboys. That's about it. That's as far as it went. I did not think that he was going to come here and make a big impact like he did. Now, I'm not saying Kellen Moore can come in here and do that, but maybe Kellen Moore can come in here and shock me, because I have zero expectations. You can't disappoint me if I'm not looking for you to do anything special. And so I'm not looking for him to do anything special. We won 4 games last year. If he come in here next season and win us 6, you in Sean Payton land with me. You've done the impossible. And especially with this roster as it stands right now, because due to the salary cap, I don't see us making any moves to get anybody. I just saw a report. Myles Garrett wants out in Cleveland. Can the Saints make a push for that? No, it's because the Saints can't do it. Saints can't do nothing. Saints cannot do nothing. I see that Cooper Kupp is on the market. Saints can't do nothing. You got all of this talent around the league that is available, but you're scrapped. You're scrapped for cash. And it's a hurtful thing. And you got that to deal with as a head coach. You know what you need to make this team do something, but you can't do it. It's just hard, man. And then the players you have is old. Your defense is old. I don't know. That offensive line is spotty. I don't know. Who would want to coach here? I don't blame these dudes. Honest to God. I'm not even mad at these coaches. I'm not going to ruin my career. And that's what they looking. This is a bad spot to land in. But with that being said, they probably 9 times out of 10 is going to be Kellen Moore, because who else? Who else would it be? Knowing the Saints is going to be Mike Kifkin, or however you say his name. But he I don't know, whatever. But it'll probably be Kellen Moore. We'll see how that pans out when that announcement comes. It'll probably be after the Super Bowl, of course, but we shall see. And so let's dive into this scandal here. This I don't even know how to describe it. This is horrible. Honestly, this is horrible. If it's true, I'm not gonna judge. I'm not gonna say that the Saints organization is guilty and all this here. I'm not getting into all that. But if this is true, if everything that I'm about to read is true, Saints ought to be ashamed of themselves. There definitely going to be some ramifications if it's true. This comes to us from the USA Today. This is an article that they posted on February the 3rd. And so this will be the breakdown of everything that the New Orleans Saints have involved themselves in. In a 2020 lawsuit, first revealed the New Orleans Saints' involvement in the New Orleans archdiocese crisis management response to a sexual abuse scandal. At the time, the team stated its collaboration was minimal and that the archdiocese had reached out to request PR assistance. New emails revealed the Saints were not only more involved than what was previously believed, but that people in the organization were heavily involved. Investigations by the New York Times and Associated Press uncovered more than 300 emails related to the Saints' involvement in the church's response to sexual abuse allegations against the New Orleans Archdiocese. The emails, which were revealed in a 2019 subpoena, and their contents had remained private until now. Among the first of those emails, according to the Times, was from Saints Senior Vice President of Communications Greg Bensel and team owner Gail Benson. Bensel had seen a story in a local New Orleans newspaper, The Advocate, that revealed that a disgraced former deacon who had been accused of sexual abuse multiple times and removed from the ministry in 1988 was still involved with a different New Orleans church. In the story, Archbishop Gregory Allman was quoted as saying he was utterly surprised and embarrassed to hear the news. Bensel reached out to Benson, who is a close personal friend of the Archbishop, after reading the story. After a back and forth exchange, Bensel suggested he reach out to the New Orleans Archdiocese to offer his aid in crisis communications, as the number of similar accusations of sexual abuse against the Archdiocese continued to grow. Greg Bensel told Gail Benson that I like the Archbishop's PR person a lot, but if he ever wants to chat crisis communications, we have been through enough at Saints to be a help and sounding board, but I don't want to overstep. So began the Saints' involvement in the Catholic Church's management and response to the growing scandal. Bensel went on to leverage his connections with the local papers, The Advocate, as well as the Time-Picayune, which later merged into the same newspaper. In case you didn't know, he employed the local paper to stay positive in their coverage of Armand's public response. And this is a quote from him, I am asking that you, as the most influential newspaper in our state, please get behind him and work with him. End quote. One of the biggest bombshells from this newly released or newly revealed emails is that executives within the New Orleans Saints organization were privy to and may have helped put together a list of names the Archdiocese were set to release in December of 2018 that included names of dozens of accused sexual abusers within the church. Part of the email reads, had a CC with Leon Canizaro, who at the time was the New Orleans district attorney, last night, that allows us to take certain people off the list. This is what Bensel wrote in an email to team president Dennis Laucher. Yes, the New York Times reported that it's unclear whether any names were actually removed. What is certain is that the list, which generally was intended to be a transparent public accounting that could help victims find closure and seek justice, according to the New York Times, was criticized after its release for its lack of completion. Initially, the list included 57 names. It has since expanded to include 79, though in August of 2023 report from The Guardian said that there were, or at least there have been 310 clergymen credibly accused of sexual abuse in New Orleans. What is also clear from the emails is that Benzel played a huge hand in preparing the Archbishop in his public response to the list release. The New York Times reported that the emails revealed Benzel's personal consultant with Ormond, including specific talking points for media appearances, help editing a letter to parishioners the Archbishop planned to send upon the list release, and pre-written questions for the Saints flagship radio station to ask Ormond in an interview. According to the New York Times investigation, Benzel also accompanied Archbishop Ormond to local media interviews the day the list was first released. The NFL did not initially investigate the New Orleans Saints in 2020. When the team's involvement with the church's response to the scandal first became public in 2020, the NFL declined to pursue its own investigation, even though the bulk of emails came from an NFL.com address. At the time, the league source told the New York Times that the NFL would not investigate the Saints until the emails, which were kept private at the time, were publicly disclosed. The NFL did not immediately respond to the USA Today Sports request for a comment. Roger Goodell is set to speak to the media from New Orleans on Monday at 3 p.m. So basically, at the time of this recording, as I'm talking right now, he's up at the podium talking. Now, will anybody ask him about all this? I don't know. Most likely they will. I'll find out after I finish recording this episode. But he does this State of the NFL speech the week of the Super Bowl every year, and we all know that the Super Bowl takes place in New Orleans this Sunday, Super Bowl 59. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Look, let me just say this. Like I said, I don't know if all of this is true or not, but if you got a digital footprint, it's kind of hard to it's kind of hard to deny it. This is bad. Now, the New Orleans Saints didn't molest anybody, as far as I could tell, but they assisted and they helped with the cover up. And you know that old saying that the cover up is worse than the crime. And this is worse to me, and it's disgusting. I just can't wrap my head around that. You know, that's a lot. I remember when all this came out a few years ago, and it was kind of like brushed under the rug, if you will, but it wasn't a big thing. Mainly because the NFL didn't really jump in, and that always confused me. I didn't know why at the time. Now I know why. They were waiting for the emails to become public. Now that they're public, now the NFL is involved, and that's where the problem come in. And the reason I wanted to bring this up, could this be one of the reasons why some of these coaches are saying, I'm gonna stay where I'm at? Could word have gotten out that this was about to break? You know, because the NFL circle is a tightly knit circle. They know. They knew long before we knew that all this was going to come out. Now, it's coincidental that this comes out the week of the Super Bowl in New Orleans, nonetheless. And you got all the media converged in New Orleans right now. You got ESPN, Fox, all these other entities in the sports realm here in New Orleans. And so that's kind of weird, man. That's kind of weird, but at the same time, you make your bed, you lie in it, who's the snitch? Because I've seen a lot of names on the top of the Saints management executive side. You didn't see Mickey Loomis' name. Is Mickey Loomis the snitch? Well, I'm just playing. I don't know. He could have been. Maybe he's still sore because you fired his boy. And he's like, well, I'm going to get you this way. I don't know. I don't know how these emails came out, but it is crazy. And this is a crazy story. But I would imagine that if this is true, I'm going to keep saying that. If this is true, Saints got some pressing issues, man. Getting a coach is the least of their worries right now, because I would imagine that the NFL is going to come down pretty heavy. If not, the justice system, the court of public opinion, that's you're not going to get past that. But yeah, man, this is not a good look for the Houdat Nation. This is bad business, man. We can't get a coach. We can't get players, and it looks like our owner and our team president and everybody else is in deep doo-doo. So we'll see going forward, but this has been a rough start to the Saints off season. I really hope that things start. Let's get the ball rolling. Whatever this investigation going to be with this email thing, let's get it going. Let's see what happens. Is this a way to force Gail Benson to sell the team? Let's not forget there was, oh man, who was it? A guy from Houston, I think. I think the Houston Rockets owner wanted to buy the Saints. This was like a month or so ago. This came out, and Gail Benson didn't want to sell it, of course. So, does this play a part? Are they going to force her to sell the team? I mean, because this is serious stuff, man. With the Catholic Church and the sexual abuse accusations and convictions that have come out in the past few years, rightfully so. I think that if you was involved in any type of way to try to help cover up this scandal, man, that is horrible. I don't want to sit back and say, man, that's worse. Cause I mean, come on, man, what these people went through as children and had to deal with that their entire lives, that is horrible. I can't imagine anything worse than that. But this is close, the cover up. This is close. You're complicit in my eyes, if it's true. But we'll see going forward how the Saints work out this deal with Kellen Moore becoming the Saints' next head coach. We shall see. I think that the Saints pretty much backed themselves into a corner, man. and now they left with no other option but to pay Kellen Moore basically $1 billion to come in. I'm telling you, he has all the leverage. All the leverage. I bet you he get say so. I bet you he get power over personnel decisions and whatnot. I bet you, because they have no leverage. They have nothing they can hold on him. Oh well, we don't want you. No problem. He gonna go back to his hopefully championship team and coach him again, coach that offense again next season, and probably be right back where they are again. And so Saints going to be stuck. I don't know, the water boy as the head coach at this point. So the Saints have no leverage. And so yeah, man, this is bad business. But I want to know, how are you feeling so far? Are you out? Are you not even paying attention to none of this stuff now? The season over, I wouldn't blame you. I wouldn't blame you in the least bit. If it wasn't for this show, I wouldn't care. I wouldn't even be watching. But when I saw that pop up on my phone, that alert about this email stuff, I was like, man, could it get any worse for this team? Let's not forget, Gail Benson, she not only owns the New Orleans Saints, she also owns the Pelicans. And Dennis Lauscher and Mickey Loomis, they all the top executives there. It's the same pecking order. And so this affects not only the Saints, but the Pelicans. So will the NBA get involved as well? Man, this is horrible, man. And then the Pelicans are sucking right now. It's just not good. It's just not good to be a Saints Pelicans fan. It's just been depressing. But I want to know your thoughts about the New Orleans Saints right now. How are you feeling, Who Dat Nation? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also search for the show on all social media platforms. Just search for the KB Radio Network. Also, don't forget about YouTube. Subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel and like this video if you don't mind. Don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Dome Patrol podcast, your podcast for the New Orleans Saints here on the KB Radio Network. Everybody, thank you for joining me as we discuss the New Orleans Saints unsaintly offseason. Hopefully the next time we talk, we'll talk about the hiring of the New Orleans Saints next head coach. Until then, I'm still gonna be screaming, who dat?